A billionaire pays a homeless woman to carry his baby, thinking a check will solve a lonely man's problem. A woman who survived the streets says yes because it's a lifeline. A newborn arrives, and a shocking hospital test shows the baby is not who anyone thought. Lawsuits, headlines, and a scared mother who won't be owned follow. The billionaire can spend his way out, or he can show up when it matters. Which will he choose? Walk away and buy silence, or step into a family he never planned for? The amber glow from Evan's desk lamp cast long shadows across his study, creating pools of darkness in the corners where bookshelves stood like sentinels. Outside his window, the city slept under a blanket of twinkling lights and silent streets. But sleep eluded him tonight as it had so many nights before. His fingers traced the edge of an old photograph, its corners soft from years of handling, the glossy surface slightly worn where his thumb had passed 1,000 times. In it, Grace stood beneath a striped carnival tent, cotton candy in hand, its pink fluff contrasting with her yellow sundress, her smile radiant against the summer sky, eyes crinkled at the corners with unrestrained joy. "What would you do?" he whispered to the empty room, his voice barely disturbing the weighted silence. The whiskey in his crystal tumbler caught the lamplight, sending amber reflections dancing across his desk, untouched. He hadn't really wanted it, just the familiar ritual of pouring it, the comforting clink of bottle against glass that momentarily filled the emptiness. Evan straightened his already perfect tie, smoothing the silk with precise, practiced movements, a habit that surfaced whenever difficult decisions loomed. The Windsor knot sat snug against his collar despite the late hour, as if business hours never truly ended for him. The Hartwell name had weight in this city, responsibility, legacy, the family medical center, the charitable foundation, the expectations handed down through generations. All the things that kept him awake at 3 a.m, staring at photographs instead of sleeping, wrestling with choices he'd never imagined having to make alone. His laptop hummed softly as he typed "exclusive fertility services" into the search bar, the blue light harsh against his tired eyes. The cursor blinked patiently, waiting for him to commit. He'd researched this before, of course, analyzed the options for months, created detailed spreadsheets of pros and cons, cost analyses and timeline projections, but tonight felt different. Heavier. Final. The agency's website was tastefully designed, elegant serif fonts against cream backgrounds and soft focus photos of happy families walking hand in hand through sunlit parks. Nothing garish or desperate. Professional. Discreet. Evan's jaw tightened as he dialed the after-hours number, his reflection in the window looking back at him with an expression he barely recognized. "New life beginnings. How may I assist you?" The voice was professional, unruffled despite the late hour, as though accustomed to midnight calls from people making life-altering decisions. "This is Evan Hartwell." He paused, measuring his words carefully, tasting them before releasing them into the world. "I need to arrange a confidential consultation regarding surrogacy services." "Of course, Mr. Hartwell. We specialize in discreet arrangements for our clients." The voice showed no surprise at his name, which either meant professional courtesy or recognition of the Hartwell reputation. Either suited him fine. His fingers drummed once on the polished mahogany desk before he caught himself, stilling the nervous gesture. "I can provide whatever documentation you require. Medical history, financial statements, personal references. I'm looking for someone with..." He glanced at Grace's photo, seeking permission, guidance, something. With the right qualifications. Background, character. Across town, the wind cut sharp between buildings, finding every gap in Maya's borrowed coat, sneaking icy fingers along her wrists and ankles. She huddled deeper into the fabric, its thrift store tag still scratching at her neck, like a persistent reminder of how far she'd fallen. The bench outside St. Bridget's had become familiar over the past weeks. The way its metal grew cold after sunset, the chip in the paint near her right hand, the slight wobble when she shifted her weight. She shook the paper cup gently, counting coins by feel in the dim glow of the distant streetlight. $3.45. Not enough for a room, not even close, but maybe enough for breakfast tomorrow if she was careful. The memory of hospital breakfasts floated up unexpectedly. The quiet clatter of trays, the smell of coffee drifting from the nurse's station, her sensible shoes squeaking on freshly mopped floors as she made early rounds checking on patients who knew her by name. Maya tucked the coins into her coat pocket, making sure the zipper was completely closed, testing it twice. Small routines like this kept her going when everything else seemed chaotic and uncertain. Keep the money safe. Stay clean, even if it means washing in public restrooms. Be first in line when the shelter opened. Remember who you are, even when nothing else is certain. Dr. Maya Collins, pediatric nurse, person. We have an opening tomorrow afternoon at 2:00. The agency voice said in Evan's ear, crisp and efficient. Would that suit your schedule? Evan opened his calendar on the screen, though he already knew it was clear. He'd cleared it purposely, preparing for this step without admitting it to himself. 2:00 will be fine. His voice remained steady, professional. Just another business meeting. Just another problem to solve with resources and planning. Excellent. I'll email the address and preliminary paperwork shortly. We look forward to helping you build your family, Mr. Hartwell. After ending the call, Evan sat motionless in the quiet study, the leather chair creaking slightly as he leaned back. Grace's photo seemed to watch him from the desk, her expression unchanged yet somehow questioning. He remembered taking that picture, remembered how she'd insisted on playing every carnival game despite the obvious rigging, how she'd shared her cotton candy with a little girl who'd dropped her own, kneeling down to eye level with a kindness that came naturally to her. Maya pulled her legs up onto the bench, trying to conserve warmth, wrapping her arms around her knees. A police car rolled past, slowing slightly, its headlights sweeping over her temporary home. She kept her posture straight, dignified, meeting the officer's gaze with calm respect. The car moved on, continuing its patrol through the sleeping neighborhood. Her fingers found the coins again, slipping into her pocket to count them one more time by touch. Tomorrow she'd try that diner on 10th Street, the one that had posted a "Help Wanted" sign in its steamy window. She'd worked breakfast shifts before, back when she wore scrubs instead of donated clothes, when her name badge opened doors instead of getting her suspicious looks. The shelter would open in 4 hours, its fluorescent lights and crowded cots offering brief respite. Maya closed her eyes, not to sleep. Never really sleep out here, but to rest. To remember the feel of clean sheets and doors that locked. To plan her next careful step toward rebuilding. In his study, Evan finally powered down his laptop, the screen going dark, removing its artificial glow from the room. The whiskey remained untouched, but he carefully returned Grace's photo to its place on the shelf, positioning it just so, a ritual as important as his morning coffee. Everything would be arranged properly. Everything would be handled with appropriate discretion. Everything would proceed according to plan, as things always did when he took control. 2 people in the same city prepared for sleep. One in a leather chair worth thousands, its butter-soft surface molded to his form. One on a metal bench worth nothing at all, its unyielding surface a constant reminder of impermanence. Both held their hopes close, wrapped in the language they knew best, his in contracts and arrangements, careful plans and controlled outcomes, hers in careful counts of coins and quiet determination, in the memory of who she had been and might be again. Tomorrow afternoon waited for them both, its possibilities still unnamed, its paths about to converge in ways neither could imagine as the night slowly gave way to dawn. The clinic's waiting room hummed with quiet efficiency. Maya arrived 15 minutes early, her worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. She chose a chair near the window, where sunlight warmed her cold hands, the golden rays highlighting the small cracks that had formed from nights spent outdoors during the colder months. The receptionist had smiled at her name, handed her a clipboard with a professional nod, and gone back to typing, treating her just like any other patient, a small dignity that Maya appreciated more than the woman would ever know. Maya studied the intake forms, her nurse's training helping her navigate the medical terminology that brought back memories of her former life. The familiar medical jargon felt like greeting old friends after a long absence. Her stomach tightened at the spaces marked "current address" and "emergency contact," the blank lines seeming to highlight the precarious nature of her current situation. She wrote Rosa's name and the shelter's information carefully, making each letter extra neat, pressing the pen firmly as if the precision of her handwriting could somehow mask her circumstances. At exactly noon, Evan Hartwell walked in. His charcoal suit looked freshly pressed without a single wrinkle, his leather briefcase gleaming under the fluorescent lights, everything about him speaking of wealth and privilege. He nodded to the receptionist, who immediately stood to greet him, her entire demeanor shifting to accommodate his presence. "Mr. Hartwell, please follow me. Ms. Collins?" The receptionist gestured to Maya, her professional smile flickering briefly with curiosity. "If you'll come this way as well." They were led down a hallway with framed medical certificates and soothing landscape paintings to a spacious conference room where Dr. Sarah Chen waited, surrounded by meticulously organized folders and tablets. The large windows offered a view of the city skyline, a reminder of a world that seemed increasingly distant to Maya. "Thank you both for coming," Dr. Chen said with practiced warmth. "I'll be facilitating today's discussion about our surrogacy arrangement. Please, make yourselves comfortable." Maya sat straight in her chair, conscious of her thrift store blazer with its slightly frayed cuffs that she'd tried to tuck under to hide. The fabric felt rough compared to the plush upholstery of the office chair. Evan took the seat across from her, his movements precise and controlled, like someone who'd spent years practicing the art of perfect composure. "Let's begin with the basic framework," Dr. Chen said, opening a folder with color-coded tabs. "We're proposing a standard gestational surrogacy arrangement. Ms. Collins would receive full medical care throughout the pregnancy, including regular checkups, nutritional guidance, and any necessary specialists. Complete anonymity and confidentiality would be maintained through comprehensive legal agreements that protect all parties involved." She turned to a new page, her manicured fingernail tracing down a list of bullet points. "The custody arrangement strongly favors Mr. Hartwell after birth, with a complete transfer of parental rights. The child would legally be his from the moment of birth. We'll review the specific legal language shortly. But I want to make sure the general concept is clear to everyone." Maya leaned forward, her nurse's instincts kicking in despite her nervousness. "What about housing during the pregnancy? And emergency situations? Who makes medical decisions if there are complications?" "The contract includes a generous housing allowance," Dr. Chen explained, flipping to another section. "You would have secure accommodation throughout the pregnancy and 2 months postpartum in a location that meets specific safety and comfort requirements. For emergencies, we maintain 24-hour medical support and a dedicated care coordinator who would be your first point of contact for any concerns, day or night." "And the timeline?" Maya asked, her medical background evident in her precise questions. "For the IVF process, transfers, monitoring, how much recovery time is built in between stages?" Dr. Chen outlined the schedule in detail. Hormone treatments beginning immediately, egg retrieval from a pre-screened donor whose profile matched specific genetic criteria, embryo creation in the lab, and transfer within weeks, followed by weekly monitoring during the first trimester. She explained each step methodically, occasionally glancing at Evan to ensure he was following the medical details. Evan sat quietly through the medical discussion, his expression unchanged, hands folded neatly on the glossy table surface. Only when Dr. Chen mentioned birth certificates and inheritance rights did he speak, his posture shifting almost imperceptibly. "My late wife," he said, his voice perfectly modulated, without a hint of the grief that briefly shadowed his eyes. "Always wanted children. The Hartwell name carries certain obligations. Continuing the family line was important to her. This arrangement would fulfill her deepest wish." Maya watched him, noting how he spoke of legacy but never looked directly at her, his gaze fixed somewhere above her shoulder or down at the documents. His words were warm, but his manner remained distant, as if she were a necessary business transaction rather than a potential carrier of his child, a vessel for his family's continuation, rather than a person with her own thoughts and feelings. Dr. Chen moved on to financial terms, spreading out a detailed payment schedule. The numbers made Maya's breath catch in her throat. More money than she'd seen in years, enough to completely transform her situation. Monthly allowances, comprehensive medical coverage, a substantial completion bonus, all detailed in neat columns with precise figures that could pull her back from the edge of financial oblivion. "We can provide immediate access to housing funds upon signing," Evan added, his tone businesslike as he tapped a section of the contract. "The full support package would begin right away, including an advance that would cover any immediate needs you might have." Maya's hands twisted in her lap, the skin around her knuckles whitening. "I need time," she said quietly but firmly, meeting Dr. Chen's eyes directly. "I want to think about this and talk to someone I trust. It's a lot to consider." "Of course." Dr. Chen nodded, her professional smile never wavering. "We can schedule the signing for 2 days." Evan interrupted smoothly, checking his expensive watch. "The financial terms as discussed will be held until then. After that, we would need to reconsider certain aspects." Maya thought of Rosa at the shelter, imagined her wise, careful consideration of the contract, her experienced eyes catching details others might miss. 2 days is fine. Same time? I'll have my decision by then." Dr. Chen made notes on her tablet, the soft tapping of her stylus filling the momentary silence. "We'll have the final paperwork ready. Mr. Hartwell, does that work for your schedule?" "It's blocked off already," he said, standing and gathering his briefcase with efficient movements. He gave Maya a polite nod that never quite met her eyes. "I appreciate your consideration, Ms. Collins." After he left, Maya stayed seated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision ahead settling on her shoulders. The room suddenly felt too large, too sterile. The money would change everything. A real home, medical care, a fresh start. But the clinical nature of it all, the way Evan had spoken of legacy without ever really seeing her as a person, made her uneasy, stirring doubts that couldn't be quieted by numbers on a page. That evening, she walked slowly back to St. Bridget's, the manila folder of information tucked safely in her bag, heavy as a stone. The early evening light cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and passing strangers seemed to exist in another world entirely, one where decisions like this weren't necessary. The shelter's familiar brick walls looked different now, temporary in a new way that made her heart ache. Through the windows, she could see Rosa organizing the evening meal, her strong hands moving with purpose and care, directing volunteers with gentle authority. Maya touched the folder through her bag, feeling its edges through the worn fabric. In 2 days, she would either sign away 9 months of her life to a man who couldn't look her in the eye, or walk away from the kind of money that could rebuild her future, piece by broken piece. She paused at the shelter entrance, watching Rosa's familiar movements inside. She needed Rosa's steady wisdom now more than ever, the kind that came from years of seeing people at their most vulnerable and helping them find their way back. Morning light streamed through St. Bridget's windows as Maya sat at a corner table with Rosa and Marcus, the contract papers spread between them. Steam rose from their coffee cups, the shelter's morning bustle creating a gentle backdrop to their serious discussion. The clatter of breakfast dishes and quiet conversations filled the air, providing a sense of normalcy that Maya desperately needed this morning. "It's a lot of money," Maya said, quietly, pointing to the figures. "More than enough to start over, get back on my feet. I could afford first and last month's rent, maybe even a small place near the hospital district." Rosa's weathered hand smoothed the papers, her eyes scanning each page carefully. The lines around her mouth deepened as she frowned at certain clauses. "Money isn't everything, Mihija. What does your heart tell you? These decisions leave marks on your soul long after the dollars are spent." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his usual smile fading into concern. He fidgeted with his coffee cup, turning it in small circles. "These contracts can be tricky. I've seen folks get burned before. They write them full of fancy words that sound nice, but leave you hanging when things get rough. My cousin signed something once that he thought was straightforward. Turned out there were strings attached to every promise." "I know." Maya nodded, a knot forming in her stomach. "That's what worries me. She paused, searching for words, remembering Evan's cool, detached demeanor. "He talks about legacy and family names, but he barely looked at me during the meeting. Like I'm just another business deal, another item to check off his to-do list. That's exactly what you've got to watch out for," Marcus said, tapping the paper with his index finger. His eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd seen too many broken promises. "Rich folks have ways of using agreements against people who don't have many options. They promise the moon but keep all the power. They use big words and complicated sentences to hide what they're really saying." Maya's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, feeling the warm ceramic against her skin. "When I was nursing at Memorial," she said softly, staring into the dark liquid, "I had everything figured out. Good job, apartment, savings. I was even taking night classes to become a nurse practitioner. Then Mom got sick. The insurance wouldn't cover her treatments, called them experimental. I used up everything I had, worked double shifts trying to keep up with the bills, maxed out my credit cards. When she passed..." Her voice caught, the grief still fresh despite the months that had passed. "The medical bills wiped me out. One missed rent payment led to another, and suddenly I was packing what I could carry into my car." Rosa reached across the table and squeezed her hand, her touch warm and comforting. "You did right by your madre. No shame in that. Some things are worth more than money or a roof. Love costs everything sometimes. That's why I can't just sign this blindly," Maya said, straightening her shoulders. "I need to make sure I'm protected, that the baby is protected. This child deserves more than just being someone's heir." After lunch, Maya walked to the legal aid clinic 6 blocks away, the spring sunshine warming her shoulders through her thin jacket. The city noises, honking cars, street vendors, laughing children, created a symphony of life around her. The waiting room was cramped, but clean, filled with others seeking help. A young mother with 2 fidgeting children, an elderly man clutching a stack of medical bills, a couple whispering worriedly over eviction papers. When her turn came, the attorney, a woman named Helen Porter with kind eyes and no-nonsense glasses, read through the contract carefully, making notes and circles in red pen. Her desk was organized chaos, stacks of papers arranged in a system only she understood. These confidentiality clauses are very restrictive, Helen said, frowning as she tapped her pen against a particular paragraph. And the custody provisions. They essentially strip you of all rights the moment the baby is born. He could potentially prevent you from ever seeing the child again once it's delivered. Maya leaned forward, anxiety swirling in her chest. Can we change that? Add protection? I know it's his genetic child, but I'll be carrying it for 9 months. That has to count for something. We can draft alternative language. Helen nodded, pulling out a fresh legal pad and adjusting her glasses. Make you primary caregiver by default, with his rights contingent on actual involvement. Monthly documented visits, participation in medical care, shared guardianship that has to be earned rather than assumed. We can add provisions about your housing and healthcare during and after pregnancy too. Specifics, not just vague promises. They spent an hour crafting the new provisions, making them specific and enforceable. Helen's pen moved steadily across the paper, translating Maya's concerns into legal safeguards. The afternoon light shifted through the blinds as they worked, casting long shadows across the desk. Remember, Helen said as she finished, you have power in this situation too. He needs you as much as you need this opportunity. Back at the clinic that afternoon, Maya sat straight-backed as she presented the changes to Dr. Chen and Evan. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making the already sterile room feel even more clinical. I'll sign, she said firmly, but with these modifications, they protect both our interests and the child's. Evan's eyebrows rose slightly as he read the new terms, his manicured fingers turning the pages with precision. His jaw tightened at the requirements for documented involvement, the shared guardianship provisions, the emphasis on earned rather than automatic rights. A muscle twitched in his cheek. I'll need to consult my attorney, he said stiffly, his voice cooler than the air conditioning that hummed in the background. Of course, Maya replied, holding his gaze steadily for the first time. She noticed flecks of gold in his brown eyes, a detail she'd missed during their previous meetings. He stepped out to make a call, his controlled movements betraying tension. Through the glass door, Maya could see him pacing, gesturing occasionally with his free hand. When he returned 20 minutes later, his expression had shifted slightly. Still composed, but with a hint of something new. Respect, perhaps, or recognition that she wasn't simply going to accept his terms without question. My counsel has reviewed the changes, he said, reaching for a pen from his expensive jacket pocket. They're acceptable, though unexpected. Maya watched as he signed, noting how his hand hesitated briefly before each signature. The scratching of pen against paper seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. This wasn't the smooth business transaction he'd planned. She'd changed the rules, insisted on being seen as a person rather than a means to an end. The final signatures were witnessed and notarized by Dr. Chen's assistant, a young woman who kept glancing between Maya and Evan with barely concealed curiosity. Dr. Chen scheduled the IVF transfer for 3 days later, explaining the medication schedule and preparation instructions with clinical precision. You'll need to start these hormones tonight, she said, handing Maya a paper bag of prescriptions. Rest as much as possible before the procedure. No alcohol, no caffeine, limited physical exertion. As they left the clinic separately, Maya caught a glimpse of Evan standing by his car, a sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than most people made in a year. He was staring at the signed contract with an expression of surprised reassessment, as if something in his carefully ordered world had shifted unexpectedly. For just a moment, she saw vulnerability in the way his shoulders curved slightly forward, in the furrowing of his brow as he processed this new development. Their eyes met briefly across the parking lot before he quickly looked away, sliding into his car with practiced efficiency. Maya stood there a moment longer, feeling the weight of what they'd just agreed to settle over her like an invisible cloak. The fertility clinic's waiting room felt different at 7 in the morning. Maya sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching early sunlight filter through vertical blinds. The space smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh coffee from the reception desk. "Ms. Collins?" A nurse in lavender scrubs appeared. "We're ready for you." Maya followed her down the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the tile floor. The procedure room was cool and bright, with machines humming softly against the walls. Dr. Mei Liao stood by a computer screen, her dark hair neatly tucked beneath a surgical cap. "Good morning, Maya," Dr. Liao said warmly. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Maya admitted, "but ready." The nurse handed her a hospital gown. "Change behind the screen, please. Everything off except socks. The floor's chilly." Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she changed. The gown was thin but clean, with tiny blue dots scattered across the fabric. She took deep breaths, trying to steady herself. Dr. Liao reviewed the consent forms one final time. "I know you've signed these before, but we need fresh signatures for today's procedure." She explained each page with practiced patience while Maya initialed and signed. "The transfer itself is quick and straightforward." Dr. Liao explained, "You'll feel some pressure, but it shouldn't hurt. Nurse Williams will be here the whole time." Maya lay back on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her. The antiseptic smell was stronger now, sharp and medical. It brought back memories of her nursing days. Different circumstances, same scent. Nurse Williams took her hand. "Just breathe normally. I'll talk you through everything." Maya fixed her eyes on a small crack in the ceiling tile while Dr. Liao worked. The pressure was uncomfortable but bearable. She focused on the nurse's steady voice, the warm hand holding hers, the quiet beeping of monitors. "All done," Dr. Liao announced after a few minutes. "You'll need to lie still for about 30 minutes. Nurse Williams will stay with you." Maya's chest felt tight with emotion. Fear, hope, uncertainty all mixed together. The nurse adjusted her pillow and dimmed the lights slightly. "A delivery came for you while you were in procedure," Nurse Williams mentioned. "Beautiful flowers. Would you like them brought in?" Maya nodded, surprised. The bouquet was elegant but not flashy, white lilies and pale pink roses. The card was unsigned, but she knew they must be from Evan. It was an unexpected gesture from someone who'd seemed so detached. Dr. Liao returned as Maya was getting dressed. "Here's your schedule for the next few weeks," she said, handing over a printed calendar. "The most important date is next week. We'll check for a heartbeat. Until then, no heavy lifting, no strenuous exercise. The prenatal vitamins I prescribed should be ready at the pharmacy. Any questions?" Maya had several, and Dr. Liao answered each one carefully, explaining about rest, hydration, and warning signs to watch for. "The clinic will call tomorrow to check on you," she finished. "Don't hesitate to phone if you have concerns." At the front desk, Maya received an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check made out to St. Bridget's Shelter, another gesture from Evan, she assumed. The amount was generous without being showy. The walk back to the shelter took longer than usual. Maya moved carefully, hyper-aware of every step. The morning had warmed up, but she kept her arms wrapped around herself, protective. Rosa was waiting at the shelter entrance. "How did it go, Carida?" "Okay, I think. Now we wait." Her bunk looked different. A new coat lay folded on the pillow, dark blue wool, practical but nice. Beside it sat a large bottle of prenatal vitamins, the expensive kind she'd seen advertised but could never afford. "Someone dropped those off," Rosa said. "Didn't leave a name." Maya touched the coat's soft sleeve. The size was exactly right. Part of her wanted to refuse these anonymous gifts. Pride and independence had gotten her through hard times. before, but another part recognized that accepting help didn't mean losing dignity. She hung the coat in her small storage space and placed the vitamins on her shelf. The shelter felt quieter than usual, or maybe she was just more aware of the silence. A week of waiting stretched ahead, 7 days until they'd know if the transfer had worked. Maya sat on her bunk, one hand resting lightly on her stomach. The morning's events felt surreal. The sterile procedure room, the gentle nurse, the unexpected flowers and gifts. She'd thought she understood what she was agreeing to, but reality was more complicated. Every gesture of kindness came with questions about motivation and meaning. She pulled out the appointment card for next week's checkup. 7 days until the heartbeat scan. 7 days of wondering, hoping, and trying to find her balance on this strange new path. The afternoon light slanted through the shelter's high windows, making dust motes dance. Maya lay back on her bunk, closed her eyes, and focused on breathing slowly, steadily, while the world around her held its breath and waited. Maya sat perched on the edge of the examination table, her heart racing. The paper crinkled beneath her as Dr. May pressed the stethoscope against her abdomen. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of medical equipment. "There it is," Dr. May said, her face breaking into a warm smile. "Strong and clear." Maya's eyes filled with tears. The sound was real, a tiny heartbeat, fast and steady. Relief washed over her, softening the worried lines that had creased her forehead all week. Nurse Williams squeezed her shoulder. "Congratulations, Maya. Everything looks perfect." Dr. May made notes in the chart. "Your hormone levels are right where they should be. I'd like to see you back in 2 weeks for another check." A knock at the door interrupted them. Nurse Williams stepped out briefly, then returned. "Mr. Hartwell has arrived for his consultation." Maya's stomach tightened. She knew he would be coming. The contract required him to attend key appointments, but the reality of facing him made her nervous. After cleaning up and changing, Maya walked into the waiting room. Evan stood by the window, his posture precise as always. He wore an expensive grey suit that somehow made him look both important and lonely. He turned as she approached, extending his hand. "Ms. Collins, I trust everything is well?" "Yes," Maya said, shaking his hand briefly. His grip was formal, careful. "There's a heartbeat." "Excellent news." His tone was measured, like he was discussing a business transaction. But Maya noticed something flicker in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even wonder. "Dr. May will see you now," the receptionist called. "Of course." Evan nodded politely to Maya. "Good day, Miss Collins." As Maya gathered her things, a framed photograph on the clinic wall caught her eye. It showed a community health fair from several years ago. In the center stood a woman, with a radiant smile, Grace Hartwell. Maya realized. She was surrounded by children, their faces bright with laughter. Maya stepped closer. One child's face made her breath catch. She remembered those eyes, that shy smile. Back when she was still nursing, she'd treated a little boy with asthma. He'd been terrified of hospitals, but Grace had sat with him, telling stories until he relaxed enough for treatment. The memory created an unexpected connection, a thread linking her present situation to Evan's past. Grace had been real, kind, human, not just a name in a contract or a reason for Evan's careful distance. Maya touched the frame gently, then turned away. The waiting room felt different now, charged with meanings she couldn't quite grasp. The walk back to St. Bridget's gave her time to process. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under her feet. She wrapped her new wool coat tighter, grateful for its warmth. Rosa and Marcus were in the shelter's small office when she arrived. Marcus was fixing a wobbly chair leg while Rosa sorted through donation boxes. There's our mama. Marcus grinned, setting down his tools. How'd it go? There's a heartbeat, Maya said, and her voice caught on the words. Rosa wrapped her in a hug. Bendito sea Dios. That's wonderful news, querida. Was Mr. Moneybags there? Marcus asked, his tone careful. Maya nodded. Brief hello. He had his own appointment with Dr. May. Remember what we talked about? Rosa said gently. The contract protects you, but stay alert. Rich men's promises can change like the weather. I know. Maya sat in the newly fixed chair. But something interesting happened. I saw a photo of his wife, his late wife, at a health fair. She helped one of my patients once, years ago, a scared little boy with asthma. Small world. Marcus mused. It made everything feel different, more real somehow. Maya rubbed her arms, trying to explain. She wasn't just this perfect memory he's trying to honor. She was a real person who helped people. Rosa nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps this connection is important. But still, be careful with your heart, mi amor. The next months will not be simple. Maya touched her stomach, where the tiny heartbeat pulsed its miracle. 2 weeks until the next appointment. 2 weeks to adjust to this new reality where past and present, hope and caution wound together like tangled threads. The shelter's daily rhythms continued around her, Marcus fixing things, Rosa organizing supplies, other residents coming and going. But everything felt slightly altered, as if the sound of that small heartbeat had shifted the world on its axis. She unpacked the prenatal vitamins and new appointment card, arranging them carefully on her shelf. The photo at the clinic stayed with her. Grace's smile, the children's faces, that unexpected bridge to her own past. Whatever came next, that moment of recognition had changed something. The contract's careful walls had cracked, just enough to let in a whisper of shared humanity. Maya sat in the exam room, the paper gown crinkling as she shifted on the table. The morning sickness had finally eased, leaving her feeling more like herself. Dr. May was reviewing her chart when the office phone rang. "Excuse me," Dr. May said, answering it. Her expression grew serious. "Yes, I understand. One moment." She pressed the speaker button. "You're on with Dr. May and Ms. Collins." A clipped voice filled the room. "This is Andrew Barrett from Hartwell Legal. We need to confirm Ms. Collins' agreement to the full confidentiality clause and custody waiver as outlined in Section 7 of the original contract." Maya's back straightened. "I'm not agreeing to that. The contract we signed includes my amendments about shared guardianship and active parenting requirements." "Mr. Hartwell's position," the lawyer began. "My position hasn't changed," Maya interrupted, her voice firm but controlled. "The agreement stands as signed. Mr. Hartwell needs to demonstrate consistent involvement, monthly visits, pediatric appointments, court-approved shared guardianship. I won't give up all rights to this child." "Ms. Collins," the lawyer's tone grew stern, "the financial compensation isn't payment for my dignity." Maya finished. "Dr. May can confirm the terms we agreed to." Dr. May nodded, speaking clearly into the phone. "I have the signed contract on file. Ms. Collins' amendments were accepted by all parties, including Mr. Hartwell and his legal team." Silence stretched over the line. "We'll need to consult with our client," the lawyer said finally. "Please do," Maya replied. Her hands were trembling, but her voice stayed steady. "And please remind Mr. Hartwell that this isn't just a business transaction. This is about a child's life." After the call ended, Dr. May gave Maya's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "That took courage." "It took remembering who I am," Maya said quietly. "Money doesn't buy the right to erase someone." Across town in his office, Evan received the news from his legal team with outward composure. He sat at his desk, fingers steepled as Andrew Barrett explained Maya's refusal. "She's quite adamant about maintaining the original amendments," Barrett concluded. "We could pursue other options." "No," Evan said. The word surprised him. "No, the contract stands as signed." After his lawyers left, Evan remained at his desk, staring at the photograph of Grace. His carefully constructed plan had hit an unexpected snag, not in the logistics or finances, but in the human element he'd tried to minimize. He'd assumed compliance could be purchased, wrapped up neat and clean like any other deal. Maya's refusal stirred something uncomfortable in him. Not anger, exactly. Something more complex. As evening settled over his study, Evan poured a finger of whiskey but didn't drink it. He thought about Maya's words. "This isn't just a business transaction." The statement needled him, challenging his customary distance. The woman had been homeless, yet she'd insisted on dignity over security. She'd faced down his lawyers without flinching. There was strength there, and principle, qualities Grace would have admired. Evan moved to the window, watching darkness gather in the garden Grace had loved. What would it mean to be refused? To have someone look past his wealth and demand something more fundamental? Actual involvement, genuine connection. He'd planned for every contingency except this. A surrogate who saw herself as more than a means to an end, who insisted he be more than just a checkbook. The unfamiliar feeling crystallized slowly. Curiosity. About Maya herself, about what kind of person could maintain such clear boundaries despite desperate circumstances. About what it might mean to be actually present in his child's life, not just its provider. Grace's voice seemed to whisper from the photograph. "Money can't buy belonging, my love." Evan sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and began researching. Not legal precedents or contract law, but St. Bridget's Shelter. Its programs, its needs, its community. By midnight, he had the beginnings of a plan, not to override Maya's conditions, but to demonstrate that he could see her as a person worthy of respect. Tomorrow, he decided, he would take the first small step toward proving he could be more than just a signature on a check. The gesture would need to be careful, thoughtful, something that acknowledged Maya's dignity rather than attempting to purchase her compliance. He closed his laptop, leaving the whiskey untouched. For the first time since starting this process, he felt uncertain of the outcome, but also surprisingly alive with possibility. Evan's Mercedes seemed absurdly out of place in St. Bridget's modest parking lot. He sat for a moment, clutching a small paper bag containing the forgotten scarf, questioning his decision to come. The shelter's brick facade was weathered but well maintained, potted plants dotting the entrance in cheerful defiance of the neighborhood's general downtrodden appearance. Through the window, he watched people coming and going, some carrying donated items, others clearly residents. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. This wasn't his world. But then, neither was fatherhood, and he'd chosen to step into that. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed both the scarf and a check he'd prepared for the shelter. The morning air was crisp as he approached the entrance, his usually confident stride hesitant. Rosa met him at the door, her expression careful but not unwelcoming. "Mr. Hartwell, this is unexpected. I found this at the clinic," he said, holding up the paper bag. "It belongs to Maya, and I wanted to make a donation to the shelter." Rosa's eyes narrowed slightly at the check, but she nodded. "Come in. Maya's helping in the common room." The shelter's interior was warm and lived in, smelling of coffee and cleaning, supplies. Evan followed Rosa past a bulletin board covered with community notices and job listings. His shoes, Italian leather that cost more than most residents' monthly income, clicked against the linoleum floor. They found Maya sorting through a pile of blankets with Marcus, who looked up with a grin that suggested he'd been waiting for this moment. "Well, if it isn't Donor Dad himself," Marcus called out. "Coming to check on your investment?" "Marcus," Rosa warned, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice. Evan felt his face flush. "I found your scarf at the clinic," he said to Maya, holding out the bag. "The blue one with the flowers." Maya's expression softened slightly. "Thank you. I thought I'd lost it." Marcus was examining a torn blanket. "Hey, since you're here, want to make yourself useful? We could use an extra pair of hands." Before Evan could respond, Marcus was demonstrating how to thread a needle. Simple running stitch. Even a fancy CEO can handle that, right? Evan removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and sat down. The needle felt foreign in his fingers. When was the last time he'd done anything so ordinary? The stitches were clumsy at first, but he found a rhythm. Not bad for a beginner. Marcus approved. Though maybe stick to signing checks. Maya settled nearby with her own mending. The quiet industry of the moment felt strangely intimate. "I worked at Metro General," she said suddenly, her voice low. "Emergency department, 7 years." Evan's hands stilled on the blanket. He looked up, but Maya's eyes were on her work. "There was a child," she continued. "Hit and run. I stayed past my shift, couldn't leave him, but I'd already worked 16 hours, made a medication error, caught it in time, but—" She shook her head. "The review board cleared me, technically, but I couldn't trust myself after that. Started taking extra shifts, double-checking everything. Couldn't sleep. Then panic attacks." Her fingers moved steadily, threading and pulling. "Lost my apartment first, then my savings. Pride kept me from asking for help until it was too late." The words hung in the air, not asking for pity or judgment. Just truth, offered like the coffee Rosa brought them, steam rising in the morning light. Evan listened, his hands moving mechanically over the blanket. He thought of Grace, how she'd always said the hardest strength was admitting weakness, how she'd believed in second chances. "Thank you," he said finally, "for telling me." Maya nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Thank you for listening." They worked in companionable silence, broken occasionally by Marcus's good-natured teasing or Rosa's quiet directions. Evan found himself relaxing despite the unfamiliar setting, his jacket draped over a nearby chair, his tie loosened. When the blanket was mended, not perfectly but serviceably, Evan stood to leave. The morning had stretched into afternoon, marked by shared coffee and simple tasks. "The check," he remembered, reaching for his jacket. "Will be put to good use," Rosa assured him. "But it's not why we welcomed you today." At the door, Maya caught his arm. "Next appointment is Thursday," she said, "if you want to be there." "I do," Evan replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. He drove away feeling oddly lighter, as if he'd left something heavy behind in that warm room full of broken things being mended. The scent of coffee and detergent lingered on his clothes, more real somehow than his usual cologne. In his rearview mirror, he saw Maya standing in the doorway with Rosa and Marcus, watching him go. Not quite friends, not quite strangers anymore. Something in between, fragile as a thread, but just as connecting. Maya jolted awake at 2 a.m, her hand pressed against her swollen belly. The contraction gripped her like a vice. She fumbled for her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed Rosa's number. "It's time," she managed between breaths. Within minutes, Rosa and Marcus appeared at her bedside in the shelter's dimly lit dormitory. Marcus grabbed the pre-packed hospital bag while Rosa helped Maya stand. "Easy now," Rosa murmured, supporting Maya's weight. "Remember your breathing." The taxi driver kept glancing in his rearview mirror as Maya worked through another contraction, Rosa counting steadily beside her. Marcus rattled off directions to the hospital, his usual jokes replaced by focused attention. "Almost there," he said, squeezing Maya's hand. "You're doing great." The emergency entrance blazed with fluorescent light. A nurse met them with a wheelchair, efficiently checking Maya's vitals, while Rosa recited medical history and Marcus handled paperwork. "Dr. May is on her way," the nurse assured them, wheeling Maya toward labor and delivery. "And we've contacted Mr. Hartwell as specified in your birth plan." Maya nodded, too focused on breathing to speak. The contractions were coming faster now, each one more intense than the last. In the delivery room, nurses moved with practiced coordination, setting up monitors and IV lines. Dr. May arrived looking fresh despite the late hour, her presence immediately calming. "Let's see how you're progressing," she said, examining Maya. "You're at 7 centimeters. Not long now." The door burst open, and Evan stumbled in, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His tie was crooked, and his hair stuck up as if he'd been running his hands through it. "I'm sorry," he said, breathless. "Traffic. I came as soon as—" "Stand over there," Rosa directed, pointing to a spot near the wall. Evan obeyed, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Maya barely registered his arrival, lost in the primal rhythm of labor. Rosa wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, while Marcus kept up a steady stream of encouragement. "Push when you're ready," Dr. May instructed calmly. Maya bore down, gripping the bed rails. Sweat trickled down her temples as she focused all her energy on bringing this child into the world. A kind-faced nurse tucked stray hair behind Maya's ear. "You're doing beautifully," she whispered. From his position by the wall, Evan watched in awe. This was nothing like the controlled business meetings he was used to. Here was raw life unfolding, messy and magnificent. "The head is crowning," Dr. May announced. "One more big push, Maya." Maya gathered her remaining strength, pushed with everything she had, and suddenly a cry pierced the air, strong and defiant. "It's a girl," Dr. May said, placing the squalling infant on Maya's chest. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she touched her daughter's damp hair. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Hello, Hope Grace." At the sound of his late wife's name, Evan's breath caught. He stepped forward hesitantly, and Maya nodded for him to come closer. "Would you like to hold her?" she asked softly. Evan's hands trembled as he accepted the swaddled bundle. He stared down at Hope's tiny face, and to his surprise, tears spilled down his cheeks. "She's perfect," he managed, his usual polish cracking to reveal something raw and real beneath. Rosa and Marcus exchanged glances, watching this unlikely family take shape in the golden light of dawn. Dr. May quietly directed the afterbirth delivery and final checks, giving them space to absorb the moment. Later that evening, as Maya rested in her hospital bed with Hope sleeping nearby, a nurse brought in forms for birth certificate registration and preliminary custody paperwork. The stack of documents seemed at odds with the miracle they'd just witnessed, but they were a necessary bridge between the magic of birth and the practical reality ahead. Maya watched Hope's tiny chest rise and fall, marveling at how someone so small could make the world feel so different. Across the room, Evan sat in a visitor's chair, his tie still crooked, looking shell-shocked and transformed. In the quiet of the hospital room, with Rosa dozing in a corner and Marcus gone for coffee, they shared a look of cautious hope. 3 people connected by more than just paper and promises now. The quiet of the hospital room shattered when Dr. May returned, her normally composed features tight with concern. She held a manila folder in her hands, knuckles white against the paper. "Mr. Hartwell, Miss Collins?" she said softly. "I need to speak with you both." Something in her tone made Maya pull Hope closer to her chest. Rosa straightened in her chair, instantly alert. "There's been—" Dr. May paused, choosing her words carefully. "Our lab discovered an inconsistency during routine documentation. The genetic profiles don't align with our records." Evan stood slowly, his businessman's mind already racing ahead. "What exactly are you saying?" "We ran immediate verification tests." Dr. May's voice was steady but strained. "The results show that Hope is not genetically related to you, Mr. Hartwell. There appears to have been an error during the IVF process." The blanket slipped from Evan's fingers, pooling at his feet. His face drained of color so quickly that Marcus stepped forward, ready to catch him if he fell. Maya felt the room tilt sideways. "That's not possible," she whispered, but her nurse's training knew better, knew exactly how such mistakes could happen, rare but real. "I cannot express how deeply sorry we are," Dr. May continued. "This type of lab error is extremely uncommon, but—" "Error?" Evan's voice cracked like ice. "This isn't a misplaced decimal point. This is—" He broke off, running trembling hands through his hair. Maya's arms tightened around Hope, who stirred but didn't wake. Fear crawled up her throat as she watched Evan pace, his controlled exterior crumbling. "The legal implications," he muttered, pulling out his phone. "Don't." Rosa's voice cut through the tension. "Don't make any calls right now, not until everyone's had time to think." Evan whirled toward her. "Time to think. This changes everything. The contract, the custody arrangements. She's still a baby." Maya said, her voice barely audible. "She's still Hope." But Evan was already dialing, his movements sharp and desperate. Maya recognized the look in his eyes, the need to seize control, to fix what was broken. It was the same look she'd seen in patients' families when bad news hit, right before they made decisions they later regretted. "I need to get her out of here," Maya whispered to Rosa. "He'll try to use this, twist it somehow." "We won't let that happen," Rosa assured her, already gathering Maya's things. Marcus positioned himself between them and Evan, who was now speaking rapidly into his phone. Dr. May stepped forward. "Ms. Collins has been cleared for discharge. There's no medical reason to keep either of them." Rosa nodded gratefully. "Marcus, get the car." Evan lowered his phone, noticing the activity. "Where are you going? We need to discuss this." "No," Rosa said firmly. "What we need is space, time, humanity." Maya stood carefully, cradling Hope close. Her legs shook, but her voice was steady. "I'm sorry, Evan. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I can't risk—" "Risk what?" His laugh was hollow. "I have no legal claim now. Isn't that what you're thinking?" The bitterness in his voice made Maya flinch. This was the man she'd first met in the clinic. Distant, transactional, scared of losing control. Marcus returned with a wheelchair. "Your chariot awaits, Mama." Maya allowed herself to be settled in it, Hope secure in her arms. She looked up at Evan, saw the war behind his eyes, hurt and anger battling something softer, something that had begun to grow during their shared journey. "I will find out what happened," he said, his voice tight. "I need to understand." Maya nodded. It wasn't a threat, exactly, but it wasn't comfort either. Dr. May watched them leave, professional mask cracking to show genuine distress. "We will launch a full investigation immediately. All records will be reviewed." But Evan wasn't listening. He stood alone in the hospital room, staring at the empty bed, where, for a few precious hours, he'd believed his family was growing. The blanket he'd dropped lay forgotten at his feet, a small blue thing that suddenly meant nothing and everything. Rosa and Marcus helped Maya into the car, Hope still miraculously sleeping through it all. The night air was cool on Maya's tear-stained cheeks as they pulled away from the hospital, leaving Evan to his solitary vigil. "The shelter's safe," Rosa assured her. "We'll figure this out together." Maya nodded, unable to speak. She gazed down at Hope's peaceful face, memorizing every detail. Whatever came next, whatever Evan decided to do, this moment, this child, was real. Marcus drove carefully through the empty streets while Rosa made quiet calls, setting things in motion to protect Maya and Hope. In the hospital behind them, Evan stood at a window, watching their tail lights disappear into the darkness. Morning light filtered through St. Bridget's windows as Maya rocked Hope in the shelter's makeshift nursery corner. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the legal aid office on her old flip phone. "We need something official," Rosa said, arranging donated baby supplies. "Even temporary papers showing you're her guardian." Marcus hefted a second-hand crib against the wall. "Got this beauty from the church basement, solid as they come." He tested its sturdiness, then added softly, "No fancy man's gonna walk in here and take her, Maya. Not on our watch." Maya nodded, bouncing Hope gently as she waited on hold. The baby's warmth against her chest felt like an anchor in the storm of uncertainty. "Legal aid services, this is Sarah," a familiar voice answered. "Sarah, it's Maya Collins. I need help. There's been a complication with the surrogacy." Across town, Evan sat in his office, surrounded by manila folders and laptop screens. Dr. May's preliminary report lay open before him, its clinical language failing to explain the inexplicable. "We should move quickly," David Park, his CFO, urged. "File injunctions, control the narrative." "No." Evan's voice was firm. "I want to understand what happened first." "The PR implications alone, this isn't about PR, David." Evan rubbed his temples. "It's about a child, about trust, about answers." The private investigators he'd hired were already combing through the clinic's records. Dr. May had granted full access, her own reputation at stake. Back at St. Bridget's, Maya met with Sarah from legal aid in the shelter's small office. The lawyer's kind eyes showed concern as she reviewed the situation. "We'll file for emergency temporary guardianship today," Sarah assured her. "Given the circumstances, it should be straightforward. Have you scheduled the pediatric follow-up?" "This afternoon," Maya confirmed. "Dr. Chen at the community clinic." Rosa appeared with a fresh cup of tea. "Maya, Marcus needs help with the changing table." In the main room, Marcus wrestled with particle board and Allen wrenches. "Who writes these instructions anyway?" He grumbled. "Bet they never built anything in their life." Maya smiled despite her exhaustion, grateful for their protective circle. Hope dozed nearby in her borrowed bassinet, oblivious to the adults' concerns. At the fertility clinic, Evan stood in Dr. May's office, watching as investigators photographed records and interviewed staff. "We're checking every protocol, every safeguard," Dr. May explained. "Someone had to have access to both storage and documentation systems to make this kind of switch." Evan nodded, his mind racing. The business part of him wanted to deploy lawyers to protect assets and reputation. But something else, something that had grown during those months of careful interaction with Maya, held him back. Evening approached, and Evan found himself driving to St. Bridget's, drawn by an impulse he couldn't quite name. He parked his expensive car on the worn street, feeling out of place yet determined. Inside, the shelter hummed with dinner preparations. Marcus spotted him first. "Well, look who's here," he said, not unkindly. "Come to serve or to sue?" "To help," Evan replied simply. "If you'll let me." Rosa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes narrowed with protective instinct. "There are dishes that need washing," she said finally. "Prove yourself useful." Evan removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. The hot water and soap felt real in a way that morning's meetings hadn't. Through the kitchen window, he could see Maya walking with Hope, singing softly. Later, when the dishes were done and the dining room cleared, Maya approached him cautiously. "Would you like to hold her?" she offered, surprising everyone, including herself. Evan's hands shook slightly as he cradled Hope. The baby grabbed his finger, and something in his chest tightened. "I'm not here to take legal action," he said quietly. "I just want to understand what happened, and maybe be part of finding a way forward." Maya studied his face, looking for truth. "The investigators are following the evidence, not building a case against you." He handed Hope back carefully. "I'll keep you informed of what they find." As Evan left that night, Marcus called after him. "Same time tomorrow? Lots more dishes where those came from?" A ghost of a smile crossed Evan's face as he nodded. The next week would bring revelations as investigators traced each step in the chain of custody, each signature and security camera frame. But for now, in the quiet evening at St. Bridget's, a fragile trust had begun to form, as delicate and precious as the sleeping infant who had brought them all together. The fluorescent lights of Channel 8's newsroom cast harsh shadows as Sarah Chen delivered her breaking report. Sources within Premier Fertility Clinic reveal systematic understaffing and budget cuts preceded the high-profile embryo mix-up involving business titan Evan Hartwell. The reporter announced. A whistleblower, speaking on condition of anonymity, describes a workplace where overworked technicians managed increasing caseloads with declining resources. In the shelter's common room, Maya watched the broadcast while feeding Hope. Rosa sat beside her, shaking her head at the unfolding story. According to internal documents, the clinic reduced lab staff by 30% over the past year while increasing patient volume. The whistleblower, a junior lab technician, reports that single technicians often handled multiple cases simultaneously, contrary to safety protocols. Across town, Hartwell Industries' boardroom erupted into chaos. "This is a nightmare," David Park declared, pacing. "The Times is already connecting dots between our healthcare investment portfolio and the clinic's parent company." Board member Victoria Chen slapped a newspaper onto the polished table. "Look at these headlines. Corporate cost-cutting leads to fertility clinic chaos. We need to distance ourselves immediately." "Release a statement denying involvement," another board member suggested. "Our legal team can—" "No." Evan's voice cut through the clamor. He stood at the window, watching the gathering media trucks below. "With all due respect, Evan," Victoria pressed, "we need to protect shareholder value. The stock's already down 3 points. By hiding, by denying." Evan turned to face the board. "We own 15% of the healthcare management fund that pushed these cuts. We're not innocent bystanders." The room fell silent as Evan walked to his desk and pressed the intercom. "Janet, call a press conference, 1 hour." "You can't be serious," David protested. "Watch me." Outside the Hartwell building, reporters jostled for position as Evan approached the podium. Camera lights blazed as he adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon. I'm here to address the situation at Premier Fertility Clinic and Hartwell Industries' connection to it." His voice was steady, determined. "Through our investment in regional healthcare management, we were indirect participants in decisions that compromised patient care. For that, I apologize unreservedly." At St. Bridget's, Maya leaned forward, surprised by his directness. Effective immediately, Hartwell Industries will establish a $10 million patient remediation fund for those affected by the clinic's practices. We're launching a full governance review of our healthcare investments, and I'm personally committed to ensuring this never happens again. The reporters erupted with questions. Evan raised his hand for silence. "This isn't just about corporate responsibility," It's about human dignity, about trust, about the lives affected when we prioritize profits over people. His voice softened. I've seen firsthand the human cost of these failures. In the shelter, Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. The next 48 hours brought a whirlwind of reactions. Stock analysts predicted doom. Conservative pundits accused Evan of betraying shareholder interests. Progressive critics called it too little, too late. Inside Hartwell Industries, the board was shell-shocked. Victoria Chen drafted her resignation letter. David Park struggled to contain the financial fallout. But something else was happening too. Small investors praised the transparency. Healthcare advocacy groups cautiously welcomed the governance review. Local news highlighted Evan's personal apology. At St. Bridget's, Maya watched it all with mixed emotions. Hope slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the headlines her story had generated. He did the right thing, Rosa observed, folding laundry nearby. Yes, Maya agreed, quietly. But it doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't fix the violation of trust. Marcus looked up from his newspaper. No, but it's a start. Sometimes that's all we get, a chance to start fixing things. The shelter's TV continued to replay clips of Evan's press conference. Maya studied his face on the screen, remembering the man who had washed dishes in their kitchen just days ago. The contrast between corporate titan and uncertain almost father blurred in her mind. The remediation fund, Rosa mused. It could help other families affected by the clinic's practices. Maya nodded. Other mothers who might be out there, wondering about their babies, their treatments. The news cycle churned on, but beneath the headlines and stock prices, a deeper change was taking place. Evan's choice to face the truth, to accept responsibility rather than hide behind lawyers and PR statements, had shifted something fundamental. In his office that evening, Evan sat alone, reading messages from employees, patients, even competitors. Some criticized, some supported, but all acknowledged the rarity of his response. His phone buzzed, a text from Maya. Thank you for telling the truth. 3 simple words that meant more than all the press coverage combined. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled in the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, Hope was being rocked to sleep, her tiny life having already changed so many others. Evan thought about legacy, not the kind he'd originally planned, but something different, something real. The story had exploded beyond their personal drama into headlines about corporate accountability and healthcare ethics. But at its heart, it remained a deeply human tale about trust, choices, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Maya put her phone down and held Hope closer, humming softly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, this moment of truth and acknowledgement was enough. Maya noticed something was wrong during the late afternoon feeding. Hope's skin felt too hot against her chest, and small whimpers replaced the baby's usual contented sounds. Rosa, Maya called out, her nurse's instincts kicking in. She's burning up. Rosa hurried over, pressing her weathered hand to Hope's forehead. Marcus, call a taxi now. The shelter's common room erupted into quiet efficiency. Someone grabbed the diaper bag while Rosa helped Maya wrap Hope in a light blanket. Marcus stood by the door, phone in hand, his usual jokes replaced by worried glances. The taxi's 3 minutes away, he said, pacing. I'll stay here and keep everyone updated. The ride to the hospital was endless. Maya counted Hope's rapid breaths while Rosa made calls ahead to the pediatric unit. The baby's tiny face was flushed, her normally peaceful features pinched with discomfort. Almost there, sweet girl, Maya whispered, fighting back tears. Hold on. The emergency room intake was a blur of forms and vital signs. A young nurse with kind eyes led them to pediatrics, where Dr. Thompson was already waiting. Maya recognized her from Hope's newborn checkup. "Let's have a look at our little one," Dr. Thompson said, her calm voice steadying Maya's nerves. The examination was thorough. Temperature readings, throat checks, blood draws that made Hope cry weakly. Maya stood close, remembering being on the other side of such moments, now understanding viscerally why parents looked so helpless during procedures. "We'll need to keep her for observation," Dr. Thompson explained. "The fever's high enough to warrant monitoring, and I've ordered some tests to rule out serious infections." Rosa squeezed Maya's hand. "I'll get us some coffee. This might be a long night." The pediatric ward was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Maya sat in the hard plastic chair beside Hope's crib, watching the rise and fall of her daughter's chest. She didn't hear Evan arrive. He appeared in the doorway like a ghost, his usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and worried eyes. "Marcus called," he said simply. "I came as soon as I heard." Maya nodded, too exhausted for walls or wariness. Evan set a paper bag on the side table and pulled out containers of hot soup and fresh bread. "You need to keep your strength up," he said, handing her a plastic spoon. "For her." The soup was warm and comforting, something her body needed though her mind hadn't registered hunger. Evan sat in the other chair, not speaking, just present in the quiet crisis of the moment. Hours crawled by. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting IVs. Dr. Thompson returned with preliminary test results. No serious infection found yet, but they needed to wait for all cultures to develop. Around midnight, Hope grew restless. Maya's arms shook with fatigue as she tried to soothe her. "Let me," Evan said softly. "Please." She hesitated only briefly before passing the baby to him. He cradled Hope with unexpected gentleness, his large hands careful and sure. The baby settled against his chest, her fevered whimpers quieting, slightly. "I used to watch Grace with the children at her health fairs," he said quietly. "She had this way about her, this natural ability to comfort. I never thought I could do that." Maya watched him rock slowly, his expensive suit wrinkled, his tie long discarded. This wasn't the man who had sat in lawyers' offices discussing custody clauses. This was someone else entirely. Rosa brought more coffee and fresh cold compresses for Hope's forehead. She studied Evan's gentle handling of the baby with approving eyes before settling into the corner with her rosary beads. The night stretched on. Evan refused suggestions to go home, instead taking turns with Maya walking the halls when Hope grew fussy. During one such circuit, Maya found herself leaning against him slightly, as exhaustion took its toll. "I've got you," he said, his free arm steadying her. "Both of you." Dawn began to paint the windows pink when Dr. Thompson returned, smiling. "The fever's breaking," she announced. "All cultures are negative for serious infections. Looks like a common virus that just hit her hard." Maya sagged with relief, tears finally spilling over. Evan's hand found her shoulder, grounding her in the moment. Hope's color was better, her sleep more natural. Maya touched her daughter's cheek, now cooler, and felt the iron bands around her chest begin to loosen. "Thank you," she said to Evan, really looking at him for the first time in hours. "For staying. For helping." He shook his head. "I couldn't be anywhere else." His voice was rough with emotion. "Not when she needed, not when you both needed someone." Rosa stirred from her corner vigil. "I'll call Marcus. Let him know our girl is better." The morning shift brought fresh nurses and breakfast trays. Hope took a bottle eagerly, her strength returning. Maya watched Evan straighten his rumpled jacket, clearly preparing to leave for work, but his eyes kept returning to the baby. "You can come back," she found herself saying. To visit, if you want. His smile was tired but real. I'd like that very much. The night had changed something between them, not erasing the past complications, but adding a new layer of understanding. They had weathered this crisis not as legal adversaries, but as two people joined in concern for a child they both cared about. Sunlight streamed through the hospital conference room windows as Maya adjusted Hope in her arms. The mediator, Sarah Chen, arranged papers on the table with careful precision. Thank you both for agreeing to meet, Sarah said, her voice gentle but professional. I understand these past weeks have been difficult for everyone. Evan sat across the table, his tie slightly loosened, a small sign of the previous night's vigil still visible in his appearance. Dark circles ringed his eyes, but his gaze was clear and focused. Before we start, Sarah continued, I want to emphasize that our goal today is finding a path forward that serves Hope's best interests while respecting everyone's dignity. Maya shifted in her chair. I just want to know my daughter is safe, that I can provide for her. And I want to be part of her life, Evan added quietly. Not just as a legal entity, but as... He paused, searching for words. As someone who cares. Sarah nodded, pulling out a draft agreement. I've reviewed both your concerns and prepared some suggestions. Instead of an adversarial custody arrangement, we could establish a cooperative guardianship framework. She laid out the key points. Maya would retain primary custody and decision-making authority. Evan would have defined participation rights and responsibilities, regular visits, attendance at medical appointments, involvement in major decisions. The agreement would include specific benchmarks. Sarah explained. For example, Mr. Hartwell would need to document his attendance at pediatric checkups, participate in parenting classes, and maintain consistent monthly involvement. Maya's hands tightened slightly around Hope. And my independence, I won't be controlled. That's addressed here, Sarah said, turning a page. The agreement includes a housing stipend that you control independently, Maya. You choose where to live, how to manage the funds. There's also provision for education and job training of your choice. Evan leaned forward. I want to add something. He looked directly at Maya. Last night showed me what real parenting looks like. I don't want to buy my way into Hope's life. I want to earn my place in it. Rosa, sitting quietly in the corner with Marcus, made a small sound of approval. Sarah outlined additional protections, a dispute resolution process, confidentiality agreements, clear boundaries for public statements or media engagement. The goal, she emphasized, is building trust through actions, not enforcing compliance through threats. Maya studied the papers, her nurse's training evident in her methodical review. These parenting benchmarks, they're specific? Measurable? Very, Sarah confirmed. Monthly documentation of visits, verified participation in medical appointments, completion of approved parenting education courses. There are clear metrics for evaluation. Marcus cleared his throat. And if he doesn't meet them? Then the agreement can be reviewed and modified. Sarah explained. But this isn't about catching failures. It's about creating accountability and support for success. Evan stood suddenly, pacing to the window. When Grace died, he said quietly, I thought carrying on her legacy meant controlling everything, making sure it was perfect. He turned back to face them. I was wrong. Maya watched him, seeing not the businessman, but the man who had held Hope through the night. This morning, she said carefully, when the fever broke, you didn't call your lawyers, you just stayed. Because that's what parents do. He replied simply. Sarah gave them time to absorb the moment, then continued, reviewing specific terms, educational planning, healthcare decisions, holiday arrangements. Each point was discussed thoroughly, with both Maya and Evan offering suggestions and compromises. "We'll need community support for this to work," Sarah noted. "That's why I asked Rosa and Marcus to join us." Rosa straightened in her chair. "St. Bridget's can host supervised visits, provide neutral ground for transitions. We've done it before. And I can help document everything." Marcus added, "Keep track of appointments, visits, all that practical stuff." The morning stretched into afternoon as they worked through details. Maya requested changes to the housing terms, ensuring she could choose locations near good schools. Evan suggested adding college savings provisions. "One more thing," Sarah said, pulling out a final document. "This establishes a small trust for Hope's future, completely separate from the guardianship agreement. It can't be used as leverage. It's simply a gift for her future." Maya's eyes welled up. "You don't have to." "I want to," Evan interrupted. "Not because I'm buying anything, but because it's right." They signed the papers as autumn sunlight slanted through the windows. Sarah collected the documents while Rosa hugged Maya, and Marcus shook Evan's hand. "Remember," Sarah said, "this agreement is a beginning, not an ending. It will take work from everyone." They walked out together into the crisp afternoon air. Hope slept peacefully in her carrier, unaware of the careful partnership being built around her. "I'll see you at next week's pediatrician appointment?" Maya asked. Evan nodded. "I'll be there, and maybe afterward we could all have lunch, if that's all right. One step at a time," Maya said, but she was smiling slightly. "One step at a time." The autumn sun glinted off the new sign, Hartwell Community Health Center. A modest crowd gathered on the freshly paved parking lot, shelter residents mingling with medical staff and community members. Evan stood at the podium, his usual crisp suit softened by Hope's tiny handprint on his sleeve, evidence of an early morning bottle feeding that hadn't gone quite as planned. "Today marks more than a building opening," he began. "It represents a commitment to transparent, ethical healthcare and community support." His gaze found Maya in the crowd, holding Hope. "Sometimes our greatest lessons come from unexpected teachers." The Patient Safety Fund, he explained, would ensure proper staffing and oversight at all affiliated clinics. But more importantly, a new employment initiative would provide training and job placement for shelter residents. Rosa stepped up to the microphone next, her weathered hands smoothing her best dress. "St. Bridget's has always believed in second chances," she said, her voice carrying clear emotion. "Now, thanks to this partnership, we can offer real opportunities, not just hopes." Dr. May, standing nearby with her new oversight board, nodded in agreement. She had spent weeks helping design safety protocols that put patient welfare above corporate efficiency. After the speeches and ribbon cutting, Maya slipped away to her first nursing refresher class. The classroom felt both familiar and intimidating, like coming home to a house where all the furniture had been rearranged. "I haven't done this in so long," she whispered to her seatmate, fingers nervous on her borrowed textbook. But as the instructor began reviewing pediatric assessment techniques, Maya's confidence grew. Her hands remembered the proper way to check vital signs, her mind easily recalling medication calculations. That evening, back at the shelter's newly renovated family wing, Evan arrived for his regular visit. Marcus was directing a small army of volunteers painting the nursery in soft yellows and greens. "Mr. Corporate America," Marcus called out, "just in time for diaper duty." Evan rolled up his sleeves, approaching the changing table with determination. Maya watched, trying not to laugh, as he struggled with the tiny snaps on Hope's onesie. "No, like this," she demonstrated, her hands guiding his. "Support her head. There you go." A photographer from the local paper lingered by the door, but Rosa shooed them away. "This isn't for show," she said firmly. "This is family business." Later, as sunset painted the shelter windows gold, they gathered in the common room. Hope dozed in her portable bassinet while Maya reviewed her class notes and Evan awkwardly folded tiny laundry. "You're getting better at this," Maya observed, watching him match miniature socks. "Still feels like I'm all thumbs," he admitted, but there was pride in his voice when Hope stirred and he successfully settled her back to sleep. Marcus brought them all coffee, decaf for Maya, and they sat in comfortable silence. The scene was far from perfect. The furniture was mismatched, the paint job slightly uneven, and everyone showed signs of exhaustion. But there was an authenticity to it that no corporate boardroom could match. "First test is next week," Maya said, tapping her textbook. "You'll ace it," Rosa assured her, patting her hand. "You've got the heart for it. Always did." Evan had restructured his corporate policies, establishing strict ethical guidelines for health-related investments. The Community Oversight Fund ensured transparency in clinic operations with regular audits and public reporting. "Remember when you couldn't even hold a bottle right?" Marcus teased Evan, gesturing at how naturally he now cradled Hope. "Remember when you called him Mr. Moneybags behind his back?" Maya shot back, making everyone laugh. Through the window, they could see the lights of the new clinic glowing steadily in the growing dusk. Dr. May was there late, as usual, working with her team to implement the new safety protocols. The renovated nursery down the hall gleamed with fresh paint and careful love. Marcus had organized volunteers to hand-paint woodland creatures on the walls. Baby supplies, neatly organized on new shelves, testified to both Evan's resources and the community's care in using them wisely. Maya's textbooks sat next to Hope's diaper bag, symbols of rebuilding, of moving forward without forgetting where they'd started. Her first quiz had come back with a perfect score, now proudly displayed on the community bulletin board. 6 months. Rosa mused, looking around at their unlikely family gathering. 6 months ago, who would have thought? Hope's soft baby snores provided a gentle soundtrack to their quiet evening, a reminder of why they were all there, working together, finding their way forward step by step. The media interest had faded to occasional check-ins, allowing them space to build their unusual family bonds naturally, without pressure. What remained was the daily work of learning each other, of building trust through small moments and consistent presence. Evan checked his watch. He had an early meeting tomorrow, but lingered a moment longer, watching Hope sleep. The corporate empire could wait. This was where the real work happened. Through the open door came the sounds of shelter life, Marcus directing the last of the painting crew, Rosa organizing tomorrow's schedules, other residents going about their evening routines. It wasn't the legacy Evan had originally planned, but it was becoming something far more meaningful than he'd imagined. Maya gathered her study materials, preparing for another day of classes tomorrow. Her medical knowledge was coming back strongly, muscle memory of compassion and competence awakening with each lesson. They had 6 months of work ahead, 6 months of early mornings and late nights, of diapers and decisions, of building something new from the pieces of their broken plans. But tonight, in the peaceful shelter evening, that future felt full of possibility. Sunlight dappled the grass at Henderson Park, where tables groaned under potluck dishes and handmade signs welcomed everyone to the community celebration. 6 months of hard work had transformed not just the clinic, but the whole neighborhood. Hope balanced on chubby legs between Maya's hands, drawing delighted smiles from the crowd. Her dark curls bounced as she wobbled, determination written across her small face. "Look who's almost walking," Rosa called out, setting down a tray of her famous empanadas. She'd traded her usual shelter coordinator clipboard for a festive apron, though she still kept watch over everything with practiced care. Marcus directed volunteers setting up games for the older kids, his voice carrying across the park. "Hey, corporate dad, bring those fancy management skills over here and help me untangle these jump ropes." Evan, dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, looked more relaxed than he had in years. Board members mingled with shelter residents, their suits abandoned for picnic-appropriate wear. David Park, Evan's CFO, was actually flipping burgers while discussing job training programs with a former shelter resident who now worked in accounting. "The clinic numbers are remarkable," Dr. May told a small group, pointing to charts displayed on an easel. "Patient safety metrics have improved 300%, and our community health programs are reaching twice as many families." But the real proof wasn't in the statistics. It was in the faces of people who'd found stability through the new employment initiatives, in the confident steps of shelter residents who'd completed job training, in the laughter of children playing safely while their parents worked nearby. Hope suddenly let go of Maya's hands, wobbling for a moment on her own. The crowd grew quiet, holding their breath. She stood, uncertain, then took one tentative step toward Evan, who knelt a few feet away. "Come on, sweetheart," he encouraged softly, arms outstretched. "You can do it." 2 more wobbly steps. 3. Maya's hands hovered protectively but didn't touch. The whole picnic seemed to pause, watching this small miracle unfold. Hope took 5 determined steps before tumbling into Evan's waiting arms. Applause erupted across the park. She giggled, proud of her achievement, and reached back toward Maya with grabby hands, ready to try again. Later, as the afternoon mellowed toward evening and families began packing up leftovers, Maya and Evan found a quiet moment near the old oak tree. Hope dozed in her stroller, worn out from her big day. "I never thought it would turn out like this," Evan admitted, watching the setting sun paint the sky in soft oranges and pinks. "When I first started all this, I was so focused on having an heir, on maintaining control of everything. DNA seemed like the only way to guarantee." He trailed off, shaking his head. "And now?" Maya asked quietly. "Now I know better. Hope isn't a guarantee or an heir or a business asset. She's herself, and watching her grow, being part of her life, that's worth more than any genetic connection could be." Maya adjusted Hope's blanket, considering his words. "What exactly are you saying, Evan?" "I'm asking if you'll accept me as Hope's co-parent, not because of contracts or obligations, but because we've built something real here, something that works." "On what terms?" Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "Your terms. You've shown me what real parenting looks like. It's about showing up, doing the work, respecting boundaries. I know you need your autonomy. I know this only works if we're equal partners, making decisions together but maintaining our separate lives." Maya watched a group of children chasing bubbles across the grass. "It won't always be easy. We'll disagree sometimes. You can't just throw money at problems or try to control things when they get hard." "I know." Evan smiled ruefully. "Marcus reminds me every time I try. And you'll respect my career decisions? Let me finish nursing school on my own terms?" "Of course. You're already top of your class. I've learned not to underestimate you." Hope stirred in her stroller, making small snuffling noises. Both adults instinctively reached to check on her, their hands brushing. They shared a smile at their synchronized response. "Then yes," Maya said. "We can make this work, not because of DNA or contracts, but because we choose to, every day." Around them, the picnic was winding down in gentle waves of goodbyes and thank yous. Shelter residents chatted with their new employers, making plans for next week's shifts. Children helped gather toys and games, proud of their contributions. The 3 of them stayed until sunset, watching the sky transform while Hope slept peacefully. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. There would still be challenges ahead, disagreements to navigate, boundaries to maintain. But it was real, built on respect and choice rather than obligation. A soft breeze carried the scent of Rosa's empanadas and the sound of Marcus singing as he helped load leftover food into vans headed back to the shelter. Hope's quiet breathing provided a gentle rhythm to the moment, a reminder of why they'd all worked so hard to get here. It wasn't the legacy Evan had originally planned, but as he watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, he knew it was better than anything he could have designed alone. The morning sun filtered through spring leaves as Evan knelt beside a small hole in the community garden. The sapling in his hands was delicate but strong, a cherry tree that would one day burst with pink blossoms. Around him, shelter residents gathered with steaming cups of coffee, their breath visible in the cool morning air. The plaque will read, Grace Hartwell Memorial Tree, Evan explained, carefully positioning the sapling. But I'd like to add something else, if everyone agrees. I want to include, and the family of St. Bridget's Shelter. Maya shifted Hope to her other hip, touched by the gesture. The toddler pointed at the tree with interest, babbling, Tea! Tea! Well, would you look at that? Marcus grinned, sipping his coffee. Our little botanist already knows her plants. Though I gotta say, this tree's gonna need as much training as she does. You planning on putting it in time out when it misbehaves, Evan? Rosa swatted his arm playfully. Marcus, don't give him ideas. He'll be out here with a ruler measuring if the branches are growing at regulation angles. That was one time with the nursery furniture. Evan protested, but he was smiling. He patted soil around the sapling's base with careful attention. And I maintain that a proper angle is essential for safe sleeping. Sure, boss man. Whatever helps you sleep at night? Marcus winked at Maya, who was trying not to laugh. The small gathering felt intimate despite the morning chill. Several shelter residents who'd found work through the new employment program stood chatting quietly, their work uniforms proof of the changes the past months had brought. Sarah, who now managed inventory at the clinic's pharmacy, helped her son collect fallen leaves. Tom, recently promoted to maintenance supervisor at Hartwell Industries, offered advice about proper tree care. The clinic's doing well, Maya mentioned, watching Hope toddle toward the sapling with determination. Dr. May said the new oversight board is making real changes. The CEO's resignation was probably for the best. Evan nodded, brushing dirt from his hands. Dr. May's training program for lab techs is becoming a model for other facilities, and the Patient Advocacy Council is ensuring transparency across all departments. Speaking of training, Rosa chimed in. How are those nursing classes going, Maya? Maya's face brightened. Passed my latest exam with honors. The pediatric rotation starts next month, and my instructor thinks I might be ready for specialized certification by fall. That's our girl. Marcus cheered, raising his coffee cup in a toast. Though I still say you learned everything you need to know dealing with this crew. He gestured at the assembled shelter residents, who laughed in agreement. Hope reached the sapling and studied it with serious concentration. Her small hand reached out to touch a leaf, then she looked back at Evan with a questioning expression. Gentle touches, he reminded her, demonstrating with his own finger, just like when we pet the neighbor's cat. The toddler mimicked his movement perfectly, drawing soft awes from the gathered crowd. Then she took 3 determined steps toward Evan and lifted her arms in the universal signal for up. Evan scooped her up without hesitation, his suit getting smudged with garden dirt in the process. He didn't seem to notice or care. What do you think, sweetheart? Should we water our tree? Wah wah, Hope agreed enthusiastically. Marcus handed over a small watering can, modified with extra handles for toddler grip. Here you go, kiddo. Show that tree who's boss. With Evan's help, Hope carefully tipped the watering can. Water splashed everywhere, mostly on the ground, partly on Evan's shoes, and a little bit actually reaching the tree. Her delighted giggle set off a chain reaction of laughter through the group. "You know," Rosa said softly to Maya, "I've been doing this work for 20 years, seen a lot of changes, good and bad. But this—" She gestured to the scene before them, Evan helping Hope water the tree, shelter residents chatting about their jobs and families, the plaque waiting to be installed that would mark this space as belonging to all of them. "This is something special." Maya watched as Hope abandoned the watering can to investigate a butterfly, Evan following patiently behind. His expensive suit was wrinkled, streaked with dirt, and slightly damp. He couldn't have looked happier. "Who would have thought?" She mused. A year ago, he was all about contracts and corporate legacy. Now look at him. Life has a way of teaching us what really matters, Rosa said. Sometimes it just takes a small hand to point the way. As if on cue, Hope toddled back to the group, proudly displaying a dandelion she'd found. She offered it first to Maya, then to Evan, then decided the tree needed it more and carefully placed it at the base of the sapling. "Perfect landscaping addition." Marcus approved. "Though I notice she's got your eye for design, Evan. That dandelion is placed at exactly regulation distance from the trunk." The gentle teasing continued as the morning warmed. Someone brought out pastries from the local bakery that now employed 2 shelter residents. Hope made several more trips between her parents, collecting treasures and sharing them with increasing confidence. Evan found himself measuring the morning not in meetings missed or emails unanswered, but in his daughter's smiles, in the easy conversation of neighbors, in the way Maya's eyes crinkled when she laughed at Marcus's jokes. The ledgers and boardrooms that had once defined his days seemed distant and unimportant compared to this small patch of earth and the people gathered around it. The plaque would be installed later that week, marking this space as a shared legacy. But the real monument was invisible, built of morning coffee and gentle teasing,